Alrighty here. Welcome back to the channel. Got a video for you today, and we are talking about panic attacks. I write a letter every week, a newsletter, and in one of them, it's kind of like a blog, I guess, I mentioned how I used to struggle with panic attacks, and long story short, someone read that, and someone came across it, read it, and made a point of reaching out to me to relate that they had struggled with panic attacks. This was an older friend, and they had been under the impression from how they read it that this was something I was struggling with currently, which thankfully it's not. But it was a very real thing a few years ago. It was a very difficult thing, and this person went on to say how they had struggled for decades. Actually, he had struggled for decades with panic attacks, being stuck in it, being stuck with them, and just really suffering in that way. So it just reminded me that how grateful I am to have found some tools, to have found some ways to navigate out of that part of my life, out of that suffering, because it's not a fun place to be. It's no picnic. If you've experienced any of that stuff, I'm just going to take these off because they're kind of blurry. If you've experienced any of that kind of anguish or fear, then it's not fun at all. So it just reminded me that there's a lot of people out there who may still be struggling with that, who are struggling with that, who have not found tools to help them get out of that. So I want to just quickly run through some ways to navigate through that difficult suffering, through that difficult struggle, because it's a very real struggle. It's a very real pain, and it's not fun at all. So there's a few things I just like to offer you. If that someone is you, if you're going through, if you're experiencing panic attacks, if you know someone who is, or if you maybe you're just curious. But anyways, I like to really break it down, and you can get into the science of it. I recommend getting into understanding the mechanisms behind why our bodies react this way, getting us into the fight or flight response. And then having our fear response, our nervous system so tuned up that we get into these fear cycles that we can't get out of, and they get triggered so fast that usually we don't even have control over when it happens. So the very fact that we are afraid of it happening can trigger it happening again, and this happens so often that people they start to pin their panic attacks or their anxiety on something external, but it's just because it's such a small trigger that it makes them feel a little bit off, makes them feel that little bit of fear, and then it triggers that fear response again. So the easiest way I can explain it is that it's a fear of a fear. It's a fear of a feeling, which compounds in kind of like an exponential curve. So as you're afraid of what you're feeling, and then you're afraid of being afraid, you're afraid of being afraid of being afraid, and it really ramps that fear up really quickly to this just this terror that you can only really know by experiencing it, and then most of the time kind of leaves you on this knife's edge at any moment, ready to ramp up, and you calm yourself down. And usually nothing ends up happening, but it's terrifying because you can feel like you're dying, you can feel like you're going crazy, you can feel like you're kind of losing your mind, losing your personality, losing your grip on reality, which leads into some of these derealization states, depersonalization states that people end up in. And it's just really confusing, it's really scary, and when you don't understand what's going on and you have no control over it, it's terrifying because you feel that it could happen at any moment. And that friend of mine who mentioned that, he said for 40 years he struggled with this, and the sad thing is that's not that uncommon. People get stuck in these loops and they're not able to navigate their way through it, they're not able to navigate their way out of it. Not through any fault of their own, but because it is a confusing kind of maze to be stuck in. It's it's hard to step out of that and ground yourself and have practices that work. So what I always say is that panic attacks do not happen in a vacuum. They do not happen in an isolated situation. We are a whole person. We are not just a brain walking around. We are not a mind and then a body. We are a whole person, mind, body, soul, spirit, whatever you want to say. And there's lots of factors in how we react to these things, and there's lots of factors into why they we get stuck with them and why they stay with us. So that's a clue, and that's helpful because this condition or this disorder, however you want to talk about it, is multifaceted. That basically means that our approach has to be multifaceted as well. We can't leave this to one book or one affirmation or even just like one therapist or however you want to say it, or maybe even one medication. Medications maybe another video, another topic, but at best they, I think, just numb the fear, kind of like a drink would, but another subject. So the clue that this gives us is that because the problem is multifaceted, then the solution also has to be multifaceted. And that's a clue. That's helpful because then we can address this at different levels. And there are mental factors. There's a mental level to it. There's the emotional level to it. There's the physiological level to it, which is really important. And then there's also the kind of the spiritual level to it as well. Now, what usually happens kind of in the height of a panic attack is, we're not focusing on these individual things. It all kind of hits us at once, and it's usually the physiological fueling the kind of more metaphysical, mental fears, which kind of work together against us. They really ramp up. So then our thoughts, we have a feeling of fear, however that manifests, whether it's tightness of chest or shortness of breath or cramps. I used to get like a band almost around my head. It felt like a band of like tension around my head. So however it manifests, that's going to ramp up our body, but then our mind is going to fuel it with the thoughts, and those two together are going to just take off. So what we need to do is work at those different levels to understand this system and then to target it at the different levels. So I recommend starting with the body. It seems kind of counterintuitive, and I used to ignore it, but starting with the body is crucial, because what we need to do is we need to speak to our body. We need to send signals to our body on all those levels that we talked about. We need to send signals. We need to communicate, because what happens when we get moved into this flight or flight response, which does serve a purpose, and we talk about it from an evolutionary point of view. There's a reason why we want to run away or run up fear, but usually with these kind of panic disorder, there's not a reason to run away. There's not a reason to be afraid. It's like a habit, though. It's gotten out of control. So anyways, if we bring it back and we say that we need to communicate to our body that things are okay. We need to send signals, and we need to put our body into a state of what I call rest and reassurance, as opposed to fight or flight. And there's ways we can do that. It sounds silly at first, but we can speak to our body. We can signal our body with different things, that instead of ramping up for fight or flight, that we can slow down, that we can calm down, that we can move our body into a rest state, into a state of reassurance, a state of calm, and really, away from that panic state. And so the ways that we speak to our body we have to speak to these different levels. And when I say we start with the body, the ways that we speak to our body are the ways that we communicate with our body. And that's kind of how we use our body. So that is through, one of the biggest communication is through what we ingest and through what we eat or drink, or inhale or smoke or whatever it be. Those are sending signals to our body, whether we realize that or not, and those signals tell our body how to react. So a lot of a lot of the signals in a lot of the normal things that we consume are sending signals of alarm to our body, even if we don't realize it. And even if they feel good on an emotional level, and this is often an issue, we think we're sending signals of it's okay by something like ice cream or comfort food, because it's going to say, oh, this feels good, I get the rush, and then on an emotional level it calms you down. But on a physiological level, that's ramping you up. It's inflaming your brain. That sugar it's spiking your blood sugar. It's basically putting you up on the edge of the cliff, priming you for a panic attack. So we communicate to our body through food primarily, and that is huge. It sounds silly. I used to laugh at it, but it has a profound effect on the state of your nervous system. So we can speak to our body, we can speak to our nervous system through the food that we eat. That's how we communicate and speak to our body on a very important level. So a huge thing to do, a huge step to take, and in dealing with some of this extreme anxiety and this panic attack, even at first, like, it might not be totally necessary for everyone, but a huge step can be just moving out of a state of fight or flight into this rest and reassurance by communicating, by cutting out these toxic foods, these toxic stimulants, junk food, sugar, a lot of grains, seed oils, processed foods, a lot of like sugar is huge, and then things like caffeine, alcohol, and cannabis. Now cannabis can help some people, so maybe you need to navigate that yourself. For me, it made things worse, and I think a lot of times it can make things worse, especially with panic disorder. But those are huge things that you should look to drastically cut out, just for a time even, in order to send your body signals of safety. And then you're going to want to focus on some whole foods. From my reading on it, that's an animal-based diet with lots of healthy meats and eggs. Got to be a little more careful with dairy, but maybe some some vegetables in there if you can do that. But I really think animal-based nutrition, that's really going to send your body signals of safety, of peace. You're going to be nourished, but it's also not going to trigger things. It's not going to trigger things, and it's going to give the inflammation in your brain a chance to calm down. It's going to calm everything down. The worst times to get a panic attack for me, and I know other people as well, is like, say, post drinking. You stayed up, you didn't sleep well, you're hungover. Next day, you might eat something shitty. You're primed for a panic attack. You probably said something stupid at the party, and you're just ready to go off like that. And you're kind of like, oh, why is it so bad today? Like, after the party, and it's like, you inflamed your brain by eating crap. You used alcohol as a depressant, and then the reaction is the hangover, and you didn't sleep well, and you might have said things that you didn't want to say. So all these factors prime you. They put you into that fight or flight response, and then even if you might have good techniques like slow breathing and stuff, which we'll get into, self-talk, whatever it is, you're already in a bad position. You've already set yourself up to have that panic attack, and so then it's going to be harder to implement those tools. It's going to be harder to implement the mindfulness, the rationalization, even the breathing. It can be harder to use these things if you put yourself in a bad situation. So put yourself in a good situation and build, string together some good days where you're not as prone to feeling that fear, and then it's going to be easier to work on that fear. Now, ultimately, we need to face that fear, and we need to have exposure to it. That means we need to experience it. We need to let it happen, and that's where the mindfulness piece comes in, and that's going to be more of that mental level where we work on this. But as far as the body level goes, the diet is how we communicate to our body. It is huge. Some of these things literally feed our brain, and if our brain doesn't get the right fats, our brain is a fatty organ, things can start to go wonky. So sometimes diet can totally clear up things like panic disorder, anxiety, even depression, and I really encourage you to look into a ketogenic carnivore diet, Whole30, paleo, anything like that, to start making some changes. But minimum, cut out some of these stimulants, cut out the crap, try to go without sugar. I know it can sound scary to give up some of these things, but if you're suffering, it's so worth it to give yourself a couple weeks, 30 days, and make a big change for yourself and see what you might be able to uncover, because it can be transformative. So that is huge, and I'm going to get some resources made up about simple steps that you can take, the things that you can cut out. But the other thing aside from diet is sleep and your schedule. Sleep schedule kind of go together, especially if you're having morning anxiety, waking up with the panic attacks. I used to wake up with a panic attack. Set a time to go to bed and set a time to wake up. Even if you have to read to fall asleep or whatever your night routine is, have a bit of a night routine. Wind down, go to bed, and then have a morning routine so you don't have to make those decisions when you wake up. If you wake up early, panicking before your alarm goes off and you don't know what to do, maybe you have a book that you know you can read. You pour a warm bath. You go for a 5-minute walk. You make a nice hot drink, decaf maybe if you're off the coffee, or a herbal tea or something. Just have a little bit of a routine. Have a few activities. Maybe you draw. Maybe you read. Maybe you journal for a little bit. You get some fresh air. Just have some little things lined up in your morning so that you're not freaking out about what to do. That can bring a ton of order. And then have the same times. Go to bed at the 11 or whatever it is, or 10. Try to get your 7-8 hours if you can. You might have trouble sleeping, but still having this schedule is going to really help put things in order. So get your sleep and your morning, and getting that anchor down once again over a couple weeks to 30 days is going to help send your body signals of safety that you're not going to be in as much of a position to have these panic attacks. But when you do, we're also going to be working on these other techniques that can help you in the moment to deal with that, to observe that fear, but not to get caught up in it. So that's where the mindfulness comes in. And the mindfulness comes into, essentially we're going to work on this process called diffusion. And diffusion, if you think of, it's the opposite of fusion. So fusion is fusing together. Say your thoughts and your fears and your feelings and you. It feels like there's no separation. So if you experience fear, boom, you are fear. Like you're right in the fear. You can't separate yourself. Diffusion is when we start to separate this out. So you can say, okay, here's me. Here's what I'm feeling and thinking. Whoa, that's like kind of crazy. It's like I'm experiencing a lot of fear, but we can let that be there. We can watch it. And this really works. The best way to do it is to work on it through just mindfulness meditation, starting with at least 10 minutes a day, I recommend, with an app like Headspace or Calm or 10% Happier. And working with these apps, you can learn to practice mindfulness, to come back to your breath, to observe thoughts and feelings without getting sucked in, and that becomes a superpower. And it sounds silly, but I've experienced this with even 4 weeks of practice, something like 10 minutes a day. You can literally make physical changes in your brain that turn down your fear response and turn up your kind of your rest and your reassurance response. So we can actually change the amygdala, I believe it is, the fear response, the size of our brain. We can shrink that over time. We can change these neural pathways, right, that we're used to running through. I mentioned before, the triggers happen so fast. It's like running down this well-worn down path. We can start to make this new path where we say, wait a second, don't want to go down that path, want to go down this path. I could get into a panic attack right now. I know that could happen, but I'm just going to kind of watch it, and I'm not going to get sucked in. And I remember a breakthrough I had with these practices when I started to realize that, and I get really into movies, and movies freak me out, especially if they're scary, and I feel things really deeply. And I remember having this kind of epiphany that just like when I'm watching a scary movie, I can kind of step back and be like, hey, this is happening on a screen. It's not my life. It's something I'm watching, but it's affecting me. But it's a movie. It's on a screen. Just take that separation. I was able to do that same thing with the panic attacks and with the anxiety when it came up. I was able to say, whoa, this is like in my mind and my thoughts and my feelings, but let's just kind of see what happens. Like, let's just watch it. Let's watch it play out. And this is a crazy part of the movie, but like, wow, this is really crazy. Now it's like a lot of fear. And it's almost like watching it like a movie. And when that happens, you can get as crazy as you want. You can watch it with some space because you've practiced this diffusion and you have physically trained your brain to not be locked in so that you don't have to live right in that fear. You can watch it and be kind of like, whoa, like what's going on? This is crazy, but at least I'm not in it. And that's an awesome place to start. It's a great place to get to, and you can get there in like a month. You can if you practice. You're going to get frustrated, you're going to need to keep starting again, but you really can get there. And this stuff all helps to just turn the tide, to just put you back into a place of peace where you can grow some confidence, where you can further understand what's going on. And sure, like there's relapses, there's things like that, but like I don't even think it's worth saying that right now, because this stuff does work. It's really transformed my life, helped me get out of some awful anxiety, some terrible states of mind, along with all the other stuff, the derealization and just the terror and the confusion that goes along with a lot of this. So this video is getting a little bit long now, but I hope that helps you. I'm going to put together a guide as well to do some of these things that you can practice, and I'd like to do some more videos to share. So if this is helpful, let me know in the comments. Let me know what you think. Once you get these signals to your body down on different levels and start to practice them, really gives you a chance to do some of the mental stuff, to realize what's going on, to realize maybe some of the other issues that are underlying, that are worth thinking, why am I stressed all the time? What is causing these? Or is there something else? But then you actually have the space and the peace to address those issues. You're not always freaking out. You can't make decisions when you're in a panic attack. It's not a good way to do it. So this buys you some space. This moves you back into a place of peace and life and space. So you owe it to yourself. I hope this helps. You don't have to be stuck in this for decades or even years. And the sooner you start working on getting out, the better. It really does work. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments. Really hope this video helped, and I will be back soon. Remember, you were recalled to life, and you can do that right now. You can start answering the call to life by tuning into your intuition and to your interests and to your desire to do more with your life. And even if that means just right now figuring out with what's going on with your anxiety, with your depression, with your mental health, whatever it is, gonna have a lot more videos coming up on that, just helping you navigate that and get through that. So hang in there. Let me know if you have any questions, and I'll be back soon with another video.